Hi everyone, my name is Devin Olson and I'm sitting here with a 2014 Fat Dog 120 miler third place finisher, Avery Collins, who crushed the course in 29:40. Avery also happens to be my roommate, training partner, and friend.
Absolutely.
For a little background, Fat Dog begins in Cathedral Provincial Park, 2.5 hours, about 2.5 hours north of Vancouver. It's rated as one of the hardest ultra races in the world and traverses some of the most difficult terrain around. Some say that only hard rock is more difficult. So Avery, how are you feeling after such an effort?
Honestly, I feel really good. Only have gotten 2 runs in the last 9 days. Obviously, I took 8 days off. Ran 8 miles yesterday, and then did 15 today, summiting Mount Zirkle. It was definitely not anything fast, but it was a lot of fun, and it was good just to run a decent distance rather than just a short little 5 miler or 8 miler. We got to see more of the mountains.
So you think that your recovery is going pretty well overall? Any little niggles or anything like that?
Yeah, my left hamstring is definitely still really tight. I feel it. It's hard to describe the pain, but going downhill, I can't go as fast as what I want to. Uphill, no problem. But I'd say this is definitely my smartest recovery I've ever had.
How so?
Well, in past races, I tell myself I'll recover a week and end up only recovering for 3 or 4 days and then going out on a run, whereas I actually stuck to not running for 8 straight days, and then on the 9th day doing something short, and then today going out for a mid-distance run.
Okay, so you think that what is your you think you're ready for to start racing again though here in the next couple weeks? Hard?
I honestly don't think I can race hard in 2
Okay.
weeks. I got Uber 50K, which is essentially the shorter version of UROC. I don't foresee myself running full speed or even hard. I'd like to podium there, but it's just one of those things that, come mile 15 or mile 20, I'll know whether or not I can do that.
Right, and just kind of just play it by ear and just see how it goes.
Yeah.
And just not push too hard if you're not feeling so good kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, how does it feel to have the fastest American finish in history at Fat Dog, as well as being the youngest person to achieve the podium?
Great, actually. I feel like I'm representing America pretty well here. Honestly, given the problems I had throughout the race, the most important thing was definitely finishing. Standing at the start line, the only thing running through my head was the record time, which did get broken, not by me,
right,
by Matt Cecile. But come halfway through the race, and even a quarter through the race, the record was no longer in my head. It was just more about finishing the race.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, that's what it's all about at the end of the day, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, before we delve into the race details too much, give me a little background on your personality and also your athletic and running history. How did you get in? How did all this craziness begin? Where are you from? How'd you end up in Steamboat? Yada, yada, yada.
Well, as I tell everyone, as far as racing goes, my competitive spirit comes from basketball for sure. I tell a lot of people that I hate losing, but I love running. I started my first big mountain run was Pitchell, which is more of an FKT. It's not a race.
And where is Mount Pitchell at?
Well, it's Mount Mitchell, but
Mount
you run
Mitchell, okay.
from Mount Pisgah to Mount Mitchell, 67 miles.
Okay, and that's in North Carolina, right?
Yep, Asheville,
okay.
North Carolina, over 20,000 feet of vert.
Cool.
And after, we didn't complete it. I ran with a couple friends. We stopped 4 miles short of the 67, and even with that being said, it was just a fun time, and I really became just passionate about running in the mountains, and especially long distances.
Do you think that gave you a little bit more confidence going into like these longer races and stuff like that?
Absolutely, because that was after running Pitchell was after I had attempted my first 100-miler, Burning River in Ohio, which was fairly flat, and I didn't finish. I dropped at mile 71. I made some very crucial mistakes through that race that could have caused me to drop. But it was a learning lesson, and it changed everything about my training and and racing in general.
So did you feel like you had a little bit of revenge after that Burning River DNF?
Yeah, everyone thinks that race was a revenge race, that Fat Dog was a revenge race. However, going into Fat Dog, I knew I was a totally different athlete.
Right.
So it wasn't a revenge race by any means. It was more or less me just racing 120 miles, and it had nothing to do with me DNFing at my last 100 miler. It was simply just another race.
And this is a little off topic, but I'm just curious, like, what's the difference in your training between, you know, when you were training for Burning River and, you know, currently, like in the last few months here in Steamboat or whatever?
Yeah, huge difference. So a lot of people that know me know I lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana for quite a while, and a lot of my training for Burning River actually took place on the road, in which I never really surpassed 22 or 23 miles as a training run, and I only did one trail training run prior to Burning River.
Okay.
So running Burning River on the trails for 71 miles was
Beat the crap out of you, basically.
Very new. It was mind blowing. Whereas moving to Steamboat, and even prior to Steamboat, all of my training is on the trail. And now the biggest difference is I'm doing relatively speaking to what I used to do, I'm doing much more high mileage, more vertical gain, more loss, and obviously at higher altitude.
Okay. So leading up to Fat Dog, I guess we already kind of answered this a little bit. What was your training like, and how structured was it? And did you do any speed work at all? You know, who did you train with? And does that change the dynamics of your training?
Honestly, it was pretty structured. I made it a point to get out for a long run, doing the back-to-back thing. About 5 and 6 weeks out, I made it a point to do close to 150-mile weeks, right around 140, where I was doing like a 40-miler, then a 30-miler, or vice versa.
Right, but mountain miles, though, basically, right?
Yeah, which was a huge difference. So one day a week I try to do something fast, something short, and 2 long runs. And anytime I was doing something short or a mid-distance run, I was doing it with a gentleman named Brett that I met when I first moved here. So it wasn't high intensity, but it was a good 100-mile pace, per se. And then some of my more high-intensity stuff, obviously, I did with you, Devin, being my main training partner leading up to this race.
Okay, awesome. So another question for you. What are the similarities and differences with your training? Because you did come from, you're a Flatlander, from Fort Wayne, and then you lived in North Carolina for a while. And now you live in Steamboat, and racing Fat Dog. Also, how did you hear about this race? So what are the similarities and differences in terms of moving from, living at 1,000 feet, or even North Carolina at
sea level,
basically sea level, and coming here to Steamboat, and then training for Fat Dog? Like, how did you, and then also, how did you hear about the race?
So starting with the race, I heard about the race through a friend, Chris Beck, which he had just mentioned it very, very briefly, and then the idea got lost.
Okay.
And I brought the idea back to the table about a month later, in which, when I knew I was going to be moving to Colorado, I knew my training would be perfect for that kind of race.
Yeah.
In the past, I've done a lot of mountain races training on flat ground and had quite good success. So I knew if I was training in the mountains that would make a huge difference. Honestly, one of the main differences, though, between training at the beach and then training here in the mountains was training at the beach. It was still tough because the humidity was just scorching. You lose so much water and salt so fast that 14 or 16 mile run would be extremely difficult.
Right.
Whereas here, I could go out on a 16-mile run and it'd be much easier, and then have 4,000 feet of vertical gain.
Right.
So there's definitely big differences. I mean, you can. There's advantages to running at sea level near the beach, and there's advantages to running in the mountains.
So do you think that training here at Steamboat, I mean, here we're sitting at our apartment at, 6,800 feet, 6,900 feet. Do you think that running up to Mount Werner, which is right in our backyard at what 10:05. Do you think that gave you a little bit of an advantage at Fat Dog?
Huge advantage. Being able to walk out of the front door and then run up a mountain and get 3,500 feet of vert in just 8 miles or more than that is huge. My climbing legs definitely got much stronger. And then going into Fat Dog, knowing that you had these 6,000 and 7,000 foot climbs that are just non-stop and brutal,
Right.
that was extremely important. And with that being said, I would like to say that I have a lot of respect for Chris Beck, who came from the flatlands of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and ended up finishing it with massive blisters on his feet. But the man's just an animal.
Yeah, these old guys are incredible. I mean, a little off topic as well, but we are all pretty inspired, I think, by what Carl Meltzer is doing on the AT currently.
Oh yeah.
And it's just like, we were talking about this today on our run up Mount Zirkle, and it's just like, these old guys, and we call them old guys because we're young, but these guys are just absolutely the toughest dudes, tough as nails, These guys can nail anything. They could make us, 20, 30-year-old guys look like wimps, basically. So, all right, so getting back to the race, take us through the sections and how you were feeling, also how you mentally broke down the course. Were there highs, were there lows, and when were they, and why do you think they happened?
Awesome question. So I broke down the course. The first half, the first 60, was in 3:20s, because these were the first 3 climbs. And essentially, once you got over these 3 climbs, the race was over at that point, or it got much easier from there. The first 20 went smooth literally up until 20. I went out of the gate in first place and kind of just led the pack out through the first 10 miles. And then Matt, Cecile, and one other guy who ended up dropping, they passed me at, I'd say, mile 11 or so. Coming into mile 18 aid station, I was only 3 minutes behind them,
Okay.
if that. But leaving the mile 18 aid station, I felt decent, but I started sweating quite profusely.
Okay.
And by mile 19 or 20, going up the climb, I became extremely dehydrated, sick.
And what was that from?
I made a very rookie mistake and over body glided and clogged my pores.
Some say you could never over body glide. But
Well, that wasn't.
take it from this guy.
Wasn't in my case. It was like using deodorant on your entire body, which isn't smart. And I just became very sick. It became difficult to walk 10 feet, so I'd have to sit down. I threw up once. I had to lay down on the trail, drink water, walk another 10 yards. 10 feet, whatever it was. It took me a very long time to walk 2 miles.
So you told me, earlier on that you had a point where you actually sat in a chair for 30 minutes. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so once I got up to...
Where was that?
Mile 22.
Okay.
So in between 18 and 22, I wasted all kinds of time. Got to mile 22, and at that point, I was very pale, my lips were blue, and the aid station people had me sit in a chair for about 25 minutes. I took down a lot of food, drank a whole cup of broth, had an orange, and just let my body kind of come back to life. And on top of that, I wiped off everything on my body, mainly the body glide.
What did you use?
Just a towel. They had a
okay,
towel there
okay.
that I asked for, and they asked me what I thought was going on. And I sat and thought for a minute, and then it came to me in the morning when I put on way too much body glide. So, but moving on past that aid station, after that I had about 23 people pass me. So
that mentally probably burned you a little bit. Yeah.
I was so angry. So I was sitting somewhere in between 23rd and 25th place, and I definitely, leaving that aid station, went out pretty hard. Passed about 7 people within the first 10 miles, but majority of my passing was passing people through the night, as they either became tired, fatigued, a lot of people turn into a death march because they just ran too hard and didn't
Yep.
conserve anything. But my strongest climb was definitely from mile